basically from upstream of Route 28 to downstream of Bridge Street by a depth of 3 feet, maintaining 2-to-1 side slopes on the side of the channel. Based on our cross sections, we estimate about 11,000 cubic yards of material was removed based on this modeling scenario. Which just to put it into a number that may be easier to understand, it's about 20 to 25 cubic yards go in a big dump truck, so that's about 450 truckloads. And it's a distance of just under 1,000 feet of channel that we ran in that scenario. And this is what the modeling cross sections look like. So basically, here's where the existing channel is, that pink line or fuchsia, and then this is our new channel. We basically modeled a scenario that removes all this material through that length that I described. Now we found that at specific cross sections, not all of them, we saw a reduction in flooding for the bankfill event and the 10-year flood event. These decreased during the bigger floods. During the 100-year flood, the 500-year flood, we found that there was no benefit to having deepened the channel. We also, and this wasn't done in the model, this is just from engineering experience, every time you have a big flood, because you've deepened the channel, it's going to fill back in again. It's going to require repeat dredging. Also, because you're creating steep sides of the channel, and the transition from where you haven't dredged to where you have, it would lead to unstable channel conditions. But nonetheless, there is some flood reduction. So we wanted to run that analysis through the benefit cost and run that alternative through the benefit cost analysis to see how it looked. So we'll come back to that one as well. We looked at the Main Street Bridge. Through our conversations with Safari, we decided that full replacement of this bridge would be quite an engineering undertaking. It would require pulling the bridge way back, in terms of a wider span. So we did not model the complete replacement of the bridge. We looked at modified wing walls. In other words, trying to better direct the water under the bridge so that it would not overtop. We found that it had a negligible benefit. We tried modeling a thinner deck on the bridge so it would act less as a hydraulic constriction. We find it had minor benefit and it didn't influence flooding at any commercial structures. There was, as I said, there was some benefit to removing the bridge out of the model, but when we tried to replace it with a bridge that would actually work at that location, it's very challenging and would be very expensive. So we didn't pursue that option further. So this is just a summary of the alternatives that I talked about. Those red X's represent the alternative that we decided we weren't going to pursue further. We were not going to run through the benefit cost analysis. And those four, in some combination, we were going to use the benefit cost analysis. It's the replacement of the Bridge Street Bridge, which is in combination with the floodplain enhancement. We did a benefit cost analysis of the channel dredging, and the floodplain enhancement also wraps around and goes up Stony Clove. So I'm going to show you the results of the benefit cost analysis for those scenarios. I'll give a little bit of introduction to the benefit cost analysis and talk about how we come up with some of these numbers. They're not just pulled out of the air. The benefit cost analysis, really what we're taking is the benefits that result from the reduction in flooding, and we're able to put a monetary value on that. And I'll explain how we do that. And then we look at the cost of the project. What does it cost to replace a bridge, or what does it cost to build one of these floodplain enhancements? And what we come up with by dividing those two numbers is a benefit cost ratio. And we look at it over a 50-year lifespan of a project. Whether it's a bridge or a floodplain enhancement project, we're looking at it over 50 years. So how do we do these cost estimates? I'll explain each one, the numbers that we used. For the dredge scenario, we used a cost of $10 for each cubic yard that's removed from the channel, and an additional $10 a cubic yard for associated costs. That's getting your permits, gaining access to the various points in the stream, dealing with water control and permitting like you need to do with any project. In terms of how often the dredge would have to be repeated, our estimate was over a 50-year period, it would have to be redone 5 times. It's possible that there would be some cost savings over my assumptions here if material could be used locally. And that's a valid point. I have not included it at this point, but if that is true, I could certainly work that into the analysis. Our approach to bridge replacements, there's a lot of factors, and we have a structural engineer in our office who I rely on to give me numbers as it relates to bridge replacement. Of course, the length and the width of the proposed bridge factors into the cost. The type of bridge, whether it has piers and the number of piers, is a subject to scour, and pretty much these bridges are. They have high velocities underneath them. If we replace the bridge, are we going to have to detour traffic, or can we close a lane? That influences cost. And then I've included engineering design costs as a component of the bridge replacement. It's not just the construction costs. The floodplain enhancement scenario that I described, there's a lot of considerations. Similar to dredging, the volume of exported material, and I use the same sort of cost number as for dredging. The linear footage of the channel on one or both banks, of course, is going to influence the cost. These areas are going to have to be topsoiled and seeded. If there's forested area, it's going to have to be cleared. And then these things have to be designed. These are just concepts I'm showing you. They would have to actually be designed with plans and permits. So all of these were considered in my calculations. And then if structures need to be relocated to build any of these projects, we use the assessed value of the property based on the county assessor's information. And we use an equalization value. And for Shandaken right now, that equalization value is 25.5%. So we take an assessed value and we have to actually divide it by that number, which inflates by almost four times, just to get as accurate as possible without doing an actual appraisal of the house, using assessed value to learn what the property value is. And then we include demolition costs, and where there are lands involved but no structure to create a floodplain enhancement, we assume that some sort of easement could be negotiated and we didn't associate a cost with those properties. So that was the cost side. For benefits, there are several ways that we show benefits in this analysis. One is if you're relocating a property out of the floodplain, that home isn't going to get flooded anymore. And there's a benefit to that, a monetary benefit from that reduction in flooding. Also, when you create these projects, whether it's a floodplain enhancement or a dredging or a bridge replacement, there are benefits due to the reduction in flooding to the structures that remain. So I'll show you that as well. When you're doing something like creating a floodplain enhancement area, there are open space and riparian benefits, because now people will be able to use that floodplain area if the town were to acquire it. So there's a benefit, we work into that. And then in the case for a bridge such as the Bridge Street Bridge, there's damage avoidance. We build a bigger structure that passes flood flows. We don't have to repair that bridge. We don't have to have the bridge closed for detours and repairs. So we're able to calculate the benefits of not having those damages. So that was a bit of a lot of information, but that's basically everything that goes into the cost-benefit analysis. So now I'll show you some of the results. So this is the floodplain creation enhancement that I showed you earlier. It would involve excavation or enhancement of the floodplain down through there, and on this side as well. It impacts a number of structures. The parcels where I show a red dot, our assumption is that the structure that's there would have to be relocated. So you can see it's this one here. It's the sort of the twin building just downstream of Main Street. And there's several others. The campground buildings here, some of them are located in that area where they would have to be relocated. Same with structures on this side. The yellow dots represent parcels that are impacted by this project. Some excavation occurs, but the structure itself would not be impacted. In fact, it would have a reduction in flooding. And I'll share this presentation afterwards with the, we can put it on the website if people want to look at it more closely. So as I said, benefits are broken out in several ways. There's benefits associated with those structures that are getting moved, not being flooded over here anymore. And this is over a 50-year period, so the benefits are quite high. You see here it's about 6.8 million. There's also benefits resulting from the water surface reductions for the rest of the hamlet. Those reductions I showed you when we compared the before and after. And those are about 2.8 million. And then we have the reductions to a bigger bridge that doesn't get damaged as frequently. And you see the number there. And altogether, the benefits of this project are about 10.1 million. That's an avoided benefits as a result of reductions in water surface elevation if we were to build that project over a 50-year period. These are our estimated costs. This includes, as I said, property buyouts using those assessed values with the equalization rate applied. Cost of demolition. Our estimate of the bridge replacement with that longer and higher span. And the cost of the floodplain enhancement project. And it's about $10 million. And then we compare those two numbers and we come up with a benefit cost estimate that's just barely, but it is positive. Which means the benefits outweigh the costs of doing that project. And if the town were to choose to, the town and the people impacted by the project were to choose to pursue funding for it, there's a good chance that it would be funded by a number of agencies. And as we finalize our report, we'll include a number of recommendations that relate to funding. Now, this is a slight twist on that last scenario I showed you. This assumes that the Bridge Street Bridge is not part of the equation, or that it's being replaced through some other funding or some other means. So that's the total benefits of the project, were similar to the benefits with the bridge in it, but the cost is much less. And you can see it's a much more favorable benefit-cost ratio. We looked at the dredging scenario. The water, no structures are being touched, so there's no benefit relating to removal of structures. But there are benefits relating to water surface reductions, because there is some reduction of flooding. The benefits are about $314,000 over that same period of time. This is our cost estimate for the dredging scenario. Based on those figures I showed you, it's about $225,000 each time we do it. If we repeat it 5 times during that 50-year time period, the cost is about $1.1 million. And that's our benefit-cost ratio for the dredge scenario. The costs outweigh the benefits. It's about 0.28, the benefit-cost ratio. And there are a number of things, which I show at the end there, that are not included in the benefit-cost ratio for which we recommend against this scenario. So this is a summary of the benefit-cost ratios that I went over. We have 2 that are positive. One would rely on the Bridge Street Bridge being replaced through some other means. So I'll just summarize here. Phoenicia has been damaged a lot in floods, many times, and there's a lot of costs associated with that. In the flood mitigation plan that was done prior to us starting this study, they identified almost $70 million worth of assets or buildings and homes within a 100-year floodplain. So if no action is taken, Phoenicia is going to be repeatedly damaged by floods. So we offer the following recommendations, and I've already gone through these. I won't need to read them all again, but we ask that the community consider consensus around some sort of floodplain enhancement scenario, as I showed there. Now, I showed a concept. It can be reconfigured as it is designed to impact different properties. It doesn't have to be aligned exactly as I showed it here. That is the way we model it. Independently of that, seek funding for the replacement of the Bridge Street Bridge. It's an undersized structure. And then aside from everything I recommended here, the community should continue to pursue floodproofing of commercial buildings, sealing of lower portions of the buildings so there'll be less damage during floods, raising buildings above the base flood elevation, and relocations where there's willing landowners in order to reduce those damages. So our next steps, as I said, we're going to present similar information, but for Mount Tremper next Monday night. Then we'll take all the results and present them to the town board. We'll finalize our report and include some funding recommendations to go forward with some of these scenarios. This will be relying on adoption by the town board. And that's my presentation, and if anybody has questions, I'd love to hear them. Yeah, we have two here.
Which website would we find the details of the report at? You said you could post it.
I can post this presentation right away. And Rob, I don't know if that's on the town website or yeah, on the town
website. And the details of the residents, buildings that would be affected.
Yeah, those maps that I showed will be in there.
Okay, thank you.
Our final report, once it's finalized, will have a lot more details on a lot of this information. Some of the details that I hit on but didn't present here.
Okay, that would all be at the town website.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
You had mentioned in benefits for the floodplain enhancement,
Right.
potential recreational use where areas cleared.
Yeah.
Did I miss it? Was that factored into the economic projection?
It was, yeah. It's a per acre figure, and it's a per acre figure, but it's extended out 50 years, and it's a number that's used, and it's a fairly generic number. I didn't go and calculate the benefit myself, but yes.
The only reason why I say that, there's been talk in this town for many years about, and I don't know all the details, some people here know a lot better than I do, about a river walk,
Right.
about trying to, and this whole area has been having some sustained uptick in tourism. So I don't think this is, what I'm getting at is I don't think this is a typical scenario. I think that the economic upside of developing tourist type of usages might be a little bit higher than for a typical community because of our local economy.
And I think that's a good point. And this is, this analysis is the first pass at this. If the town were to pick up on this concept and advance it, and there's a lot they could do in terms of making the proposal more favorable by the sorts of things that you're talking about, so it's a good point. Yes?
Did you model a scenario where the Bridge Street bridge is replaced with a much wider bridge without the dredging?
We did. Oh, without the dredging? Without the widening of the floodplain? Right. We did. And it's interesting because we did both. We tried to leave the bridge in place and enhance the channel, which doesn't work very well. But then we also tried a bigger bridge. And there is some benefit, but it's, the channel and the floodplain there are undersized to pass the flood flows. So with a bigger bridge, it helps a little bit. And I think I showed one graphic. It's, you have about a 3-foot reduction immediately upstream of the bridge, but it quickly diminishes going upstream. It's a very localized benefit.
Yeah, but my point is that the bridge then wouldn't be getting damaged every time there's a huge flood. And so the replacement or the fixing of the bridge would be a cost benefit.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, I didn't run the benefit cost analysis for the bridge replacement alone. It would
you showed $480,000
Yeah.
in deduction
Yes.
of damages to the bridge over a 50-year period with an
Right.
upsized bridge.
That's right,
So
yeah,
that would be essentially your reduced damages are
that's right.
$480,000
That's a good point,
over a
yeah.
50-year period.
Yeah, that's right. And that's,
Not the total cost of the replacement of the bridge, but still not a kind of inconsequential amount of money.
that's right, yeah, yeah. Yes,
So if you were to enhance the floodplains on either side of the channel, are you calculating the mind of the river when it wants to move over to that enhanced floodplain and become a new channel?
that's not modeled here, but
Yeah, but that's
the,
what happens in this area a lot. It moves, the river moves.
Anytime there's a flood.
There's a high water event, especially a very high water event, the channel tends to move. So I wonder about that. Because also if you're creating this floodplain where the water can go when it is a high water event and the channel moves, then you have another situation. It's completely different than what you modeled.
yeah, it's a good point. There's as I said, it's a first pass. You know, here we're not designing anything. We're modeling a scenario. This would have to be designed in a way that would be stable. The areas get flooded now. You know, this would just be lowering those areas to allow the floodplains to convey more water. But you're right. I mean, it's a very dynamic section of channel. It moves around, and a lot of sediment gets moved through it. It would have to be designed such that to withstand that sort of flood. Yeah, Mark.
Mark, would you be able to put the animated sequence of the duration for Hurricane Irene on the website?
You know, I'm running that right in the HECRAS program. And the reason it isn't an easy way to sort of make it into a movie. I'll have to see if I can do that, because it will be very useful.
Yeah.
Right now, I don't know of a way to create like a movie out of it that most people would be able to look at. Because I ran that in a separate software.
Can you slow it down?
I can slow it.
The rate at which it progresses through it,
I can, but I don't have a way for like the general public to view it.
other than
Yeah.
directly videoing it as you're playing it out.
Yeah, unless they all,
Large
unless they got the HECRAS software.
Or just record,
Yeah.
recording of it,
Right, yeah.
make a video of it
Probably-
running,
I
yeah.
could probably do it with my phone. But,
Yeah.
yeah, we'll figure something out, because it's,
Will we have it?
yeah, well, we have it there. Yeah, Mark, you were question?
What was the figure you said, was that the total value of all the structures in Phoenicia? You said it was $750 million.
No,
Is that-
it's about 69 million of this. This is from this isn't part of our analysis, this is part of the Town of Shandaken flood mitigation plan. Basically, for just Phoenicia, they looked at structures within the 100-year floodplain and using assessed values, put a value on them, and it's $69 million. And it's 23% of the total number of buildings. And Aaron told me the total number might be a little bit off. I'm quoting someone else's report here. It might be a little high, but that's just a value to, a ballpark value to put out there. And that's, yes.
I live on Upper High Street, and during Irene, the surface came over, we had to petition the roadway. And of course, the bridge was out and the trees were in. So with this fixing the bridge and dredging, how would that affect High Street? Because the water just came over, and we were getting water from the stream right in the back of the property. So what would happen to High Street?
Well, it depends where on High Street, but
Well,
flooding-
189.
I could go back to the maps and show you the before and after. I mean, the thing is, they won't tell you an exact number.
Let's say from Bridge Street, from the Bridge Street Bridge, maybe a quarter of a mile down. you know, right? It's about a quarter mile down from, Bridge Street.
Downstream.
It would be upstream from Bridge Street going towards Woodland Valley.
Yeah, okay.
Like halfway between Bridge Street and Woodland Valley Bridge.
Yeah,
Street and a water plant a little bit.
There's a strip of houses along there.
right.
Just upstream of the water plant.
Yes, there is.
Oh, yeah. Right around there,
Here
yeah.
I am.
Okay, so if I had the model in front of me, I could give you a more precise number, but here you just have to look at the shade of blue and look how it changes and this is during an Irene magnitude flood. It's not, and I don't have a tag in that area. There's not a lot of reduction up there. There's some, because most of it is concentrated through this area. There's a small amount of reduction here. I didn't put a tag on there.
How frequently would you expect an Irene-like event?
Well, that's a tricky question because the only we could look at what sort of magnitude event Irene was is where there's a gauge. And there's no gauge here. There's a gauge quite a bit upstream. It's Alabin, right? There's a gauge there. And, but that's well, there's one on Woodland Valley, but that's a tributary, right?
Right.
The one at Alabin is upstream of the Stony Clove tributary. And I think there, I don't know if I'll remember these numbers off the top of my head, but it exceeded a 50-year flood. Did not exceed a 100-year flood. Then our next gauge is downstream below the Beaver Kill. And then we have these tributaries coming in. So there we could calculate exactly what magnitude flood Irene was, but here in between it's a little more challenging. But it's, I would say greater than a 50, but less than 100. And I don't know if Rob, you have the most current figures on that, but we sort of have a range. Yeah. But I should also say, when we say 100-year flood, that's based on statistics looking at floods that have occurred in the past, flows that have occurred in the past. We're getting a lot of these floods lately. And whether that's a blip or whether that's climate change, nobody knows for sure. But we're getting more and more severe flood events. So what was a 100-year event seems to be happening more frequently. Yes?
I don't think I got my answer.
I would just say, I could get you a more exact number for that area, but there's not a huge benefit in that area. Most of the benefit is downstream of that, from that scenario that I showed.
So isn't there something that you could recommend to help us out there? I mean, you're not even helping my house out.
Well, historically, until Irene, the upper High Street area where there are flood houses along there, most of the flooding was like the rising water table. So the water was coming up from, instead of coming over the Esopus, it was coming up from underground. So historically, prior to Irene, between I would just say between the late 90s and 2011, there was probably maybe 6 to 8 flooded, maybe 5 feet high of water in basements and stuff like that from the water table. So with that increasing the floodplain, dredging, etc., would that affect the water table rising up like that?
Well, we don't model for that. We're strictly modeling the floodplains. I would imagine that if you are, on this side of some sort of floodplain enhancement scenario, because you're lowering the ground elevation, it would have some influence, probably lowering groundwater. But we don't really look at that in this modeling. That's that would be fairly complicated groundwater modeling to understand what happened with that. Yeah, Rick.
What happened there was the railroad went out. And the railroad used to shore up the bank whenever there was a flood for years. Every time that we had high water, they came in there and they fixed it. And that's the reason why that whole section there floods and they get water in the basement because of that.